Transmitting live from Brooklyn. This is Brooklyn Ole Headz. Our last story is this week's elections were expected to be the formal finale of the tumultuous 2020 election season. Well, guess who had other plans? The soulful reverberations of the Democrats' success was drowned out by death metal chaos and college fraternity-type violence in Washington, D.C., where rabid Trump supporters laid siege to the U.S. Capitol to prevent Congress from certifying Joe Biden's presidential victory. This unprecedented insurrection drew overdue criticism of Trump's leadership from within his own party. What's that saying now? Rats. Sinking ship. Combined with the ass-kicking in Georgia, this coup is among the most pitiful of self-inflicted L's in his divisive presidency. So how does Brooklyn address the apple pie American hypocrisy and mobilize the momentum of the monumental Democratic overtaking of the U.S. Senate? With a protest! You already! Local news source, the Brooklyn paper, recently reported that hundreds of anti-Trump protesters marched through Brooklyn the day after the Capitol building coup attempt to demand Donald Trump's impeachment after his supporters, party poopers, launched their insurrection. The rally began at Barclays Center as demonstrators marched down Flatbush Avenue to the Prospect Park West apartment building of incoming Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, where they demanded the legislature act to both oust Trump and remove Republican politicians they declare are equally responsible for propagating the myth of a stolen election. While Mike Pence has resisted calls to invoke the 25th Amendment, which would remove Trump from office before his term expires on January 20th, left aisle legislators have signaled that impeachment proceedings have begun in the House of Representatives as of January 8th. And all along I thought politicians had only one speed: apathy. The idea of a potential impeachment has already gathered significant support in both legislative chambers, including from Schumer and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Demonstrators at this rally also took Lorena Bobbitt-level exception to the impotent Capitol Police for their welcoming approach toward the pro-Trump traitors, which are in vivid contrast to their paramilitary maneuvers on Black Lives Matter protesters over the summer. The demonstrators cite the fact that the crowd in D.C. was predominantly white, a somewhat plausible factor to explain the disparities in the use of police power. Quote, "We know if these insurrectionists rioters had but an ounce of melanin in their skin, they'd still be cleaning up blood on the floor of the steps," public advocate Jumaane Williams was quoted as saying. Another quote, we wouldn't have even made it to the steps." Making comparisons with the Capitol riot with Black Lives Matter protests is disingenuous, according to Williams, due to the vastly different motivations of the two groups. It's kind of like comparing Nelson Mandela to famed Guyana cult leader Jim Jones. Both tried to have people come together, but for very different purposes. Quote, "There were people marching in the streets saying Black Lives Matter, trying to raise up the fact that black people were dying, unarmed by police officers. State-sanctioned violence," the public advocate said. "If you saw what happened yesterday, and you saw what happened to people in the Black Lives Matter movement, and still do not see the disparity in this country, you are now willfully ignorant and willfully complicit in that disparity," Williams declared. Police made no arrests and issued no summons at this night's Brooklyn rally, which also featured calls from demonstrators to defund the police and chants of quote-unquote "quit your jobs" directed at uniformed officers. Wait, this just in. Stunning update, ladies and gentlemen. Mounting evidence continues to suggest that police can be very measured and restrained in organized community protests, even if people of color are indeed involved. Once outside Senator Schumer's apartment, organizers delivered a message to the Democratic Party leadership. These Democratic leaders are set to assume control of the White House along with both legislative chambers in Washington. The march's organizers sent assurances that they would continue to pressure them to enact progressive legislation now that they were in power, said Queens Assembly member Zohran Mamdani. "We are going to be out here protesting. We are going to be in the chambers in Albany. We are going to be in D.C. we're going to be all over. To make it very clear, the days of the bare minimum are over. And that's going to take us into 2021, my people. This Ole Head wishes you and all those you love a very prosperous, safe, and healthy new year. I wish I could say that the country will be secure and stable by then, but that would be capping, as our young ones say.
3, 2, 1, and action!
Transmitting live from Brooklyn, this is Brooklyn Ole Headz.